The air in the room compresses, thick and sudden, like a fist closing around my chest. He's on the floor. Not lying down, not sleeping, but collapsed. Limbs splayed at odd angles, eyes wide, fixed on something only he can see, or perhaps seeing nothing at all. A low, ragged sound claws its way from his throat, not a cry, not a gasp, but the raw, guttural shock of a body giving up. The phone, still clutched in his hand, spills tinny, distorted words I can't quite make out, official, cold, clipped. My name hangs in the silence between the sounds, a phantom echo. The room, moments ago just a living room bathed in the ordinary afternoon light, has become the precise point where two lives collide, not with a bang, but with this broken whisper, this sudden, terrifying stillness in a man I thought I knew. His face is a roadmap of pure, unadulterated disbelief, crumbling in real time before my eyes. The color drains away, leaving behind a sickly, greyish hue, like ash. His chest heaves once, a shallow, frantic movement, then settles into that unnerving, shallow pattern. There is no sound from him now, just the faint, metallic hum of the phone, still whispering its terrible truths. If you've ever felt the ground disappear beneath your feet, the solid world turning into quicksand, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe, it helps me more than you know. Life before this moment felt like a carefully constructed diorama. You know the kind, miniature trees, tiny painted people smiling, a perfect blue sky background. It was quiet, predictable, comfortable. My world centered around the gentle rhythm of our days. Waking up beside him, the shared ritual of coffee, the easy silences broken by comfortable chat about work or the weather. Our house was our sanctuary, filled with the scent of old books and freshly baked bread, a quiet hum of normalcy that felt unshakable. My desires were simple, a steady life, shared moments, maybe a small garden one day where I could get my hands dirty and watch things grow. He was my anchor, the steady presence in the background of my hopes and dreams. He handled the finances, always had. Said I worried too much, that numbers weren't my strong suit. I trusted him implicitly. Why wouldn't I? He was my husband, my partner, the man who swore to protect me, to build a future with me. His focus on money felt like responsibility, like providing. He worked hard, often late. Said he was building something for us. It felt good to be cared for, to have that burden lifted. I focused on building our home, on creating that safe, warm space. We talk about retirement, about travel, about growing old together on a porch swing. These weren't grand ambitions, but they were ours, rooted in a shared vision of quiet contentment. I saw him as meticulous, perhaps a little overly cautious with finances, but fundamentally honest, fundamentally good. He was the steady hand on the tiller, navigating our little ship through calm waters. I never questioned the course he set, never felt the need to check the maps myself. Why would I? The horizon looked clear, the sky was blue. Our life felt like a promise kept, day after ordinary day. I remember feeling a profound sense of peace, of being exactly where I was supposed to be, building a life brick by steady brick, with him right beside me. The mundane details of those days now feel impossibly precious, coated in a layer of heartbreaking nostalgia. The way the sun used to fall through the kitchen window in the morning, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. His particular way of whistling off-key when he was concentrating. The comfort of his weight beside me on the sofa in the evenings. It all felt so real, so solid. I built my future on the foundation of our shared life, never once imagining it was built on sand. My identity was woven into the fabric of our us. My hopes, my security, my sense of self, they were all tied to the belief that we were a single unit, moving forward together, transparently, honestly. I poured my energy into nurturing this shared space, this partnership. I believed in the fundamental goodness of the man I married. I believed in the promises we made, the vows we exchanged. It wasn't just about love. It was about a profound, unshakable trust. Trust that he had my best interests at heart, that our futures were inextricably linked, that he would never do anything to jeopardize us. This trust was the bedrock of my world. It allowed me to feel safe, to dream, to plan. It was the quiet confidence that I was partnered with someone who saw me, valued me, and would always act with integrity towards our shared life. The idea that he could be anything less than this was not just unthinkable, it was outside the realm of possibility in my mind. He was my safe harbor, and I was content to rest in that safety, believing it was earned, believing it was real. I didn't need to understand the complexities of his financial dealings. He did that, and I trusted him to do it for us. It felt like a fair division of labor, a natural partnership. He built the financial security. I built the home, the emotional core. It felt balanced, right? Little did I know, one side of the equation was built on a lie, a fundamental deception that would shatter everything I thought I knew. The comfort I felt was a carefully constructed illusion, and the man I shared my life with was the architect of my eventual destruction. The small, seemingly insignificant details I overlooked now scream at me in retrospect. His sudden defensiveness about the mail, the way he'd quickly close tabs on his computer if I walked by, the vague answers about certain investments. At the time, I dismissed them as quirks, privacy, his way of handling things. Now, they feel like flashing red warning lights I willingly ignored, blinded by trust, by love, by the sheer unwillingness to believe the man I shared my bed with could be capable of deceit on such a scale. The foundation felt solid, but it was already riddled with cracks I couldn't see, or perhaps refused to see. The first tremor was subtle, a whisper of something off-key. It started with a piece of mail, not a bill or a statement I recognized, but an official-looking envelope addressed to me, from a financial institution I'd never heard of. I handed it to him, frowning. "What's this?" I asked, my voice light, curious. He took it, his hand closing around it a little too quickly. A flicker crossed his face, gone in an instant, replaced by a strained smile. "Oh, just some junk mail," he said, tossing it onto the kitchen counter. "They send stuff out randomly sometimes. Don't worry about it." He changed the subject smoothly, asking about my day. I let it go. Junk mail happens, right? But something about his reaction, the way he avoided my eyes, snagged in my mind. A tiny seed of unease, microscopic and easily dismissed. Then came the credit alert. An email notification pinged on my phone. A new account opened in my name. My blood ran cold. I opened the email, my fingers trembling slightly. It listed a type of investment account, one I knew nothing about. And it listed my name, my address, and partial details that looked like my SSN, masked for security. My heart hammered against my ribs. This couldn't be right. I hadn't opened any account. I hadn't applied for anything. I went to him. The phone clutched tight in my hand, the email a glaring accusation on the screen. "What is this?" I asked, my voice shaking now, no longer curious, but laced with fear. He glanced at the screen, and his face went utterly blank for a fraction of a second before the mask slammed back into place. "Oh, that," he said, trying for nonchalance, but his voice was a little too high. "Yeah, I was thinking about consolidating some things, maybe setting up something for us, you know? Just exploring options." Must have triggered an alert. He waved a dismissive hand. "It's nothing really. Just preliminary stuff." He tried to take the phone from me. I pulled back. "But it's in my name, with my social security number." I didn't authorize this. My voice was rising, edging towards panic. "Why would you do this without telling me? What kind of account is it?" His demeanor shifted. The strained smile vanished, replaced by impatience, then frustration. "Look," I said, "it's fine. It's for us. I'm handling things. You don't need to worry about the details." His tone was sharp, final. "It's complicated financial stuff. I told you, you don't need to understand it." He was pulling the "you're not good with numbers" card, the one that always shut down conversations about money. But this felt different. This felt like a fundamental violation. Using my SSN without my knowledge? That wasn't just handling things. That was... I didn't even have a word for it yet, but it felt profoundly wrong. I tried to push, to ask more questions, but He shut down completely, his jaw tight, his eyes cold. "Drop it," he said, his voice low and hard. "I'm taking care of everything. Trust me, trust him?" The word felt like ash on my tongue. How could I trust him when he was doing things behind my back, in my name, using my identity? The seed of unease blossomed into a thorny, painful vine, wrapping around my chest, making it hard to breathe. Sleep became a battleground, my mind replaying the conversation, searching for explanations, finding none that weren't terrifying. Every locked drawer, every hushed phone call, every piece of mail he intercepted, they all took on a sinister new meaning. The quiet rhythm of our life began to feel less like peace and more like a carefully orchestrated silence, designed to hide something terrible. The foundation wasn't just cracked, I could feel it beginning to crumble beneath my feet. My first attempts to understand were clumsy, steeped in denial. I wanted to believe his explanation, wanted to shove that thorny vine back down, to restore the comfortable illusion. I told myself he was just being protective, overly secretive maybe, but not malicious. I tried asking again, more gently this time, framing it as needing to understand our finances better, wanting to be more involved. He deflected, charmed, sometimes became impatient. He'd say things like, "It's just easier if I handle it, darling. You have enough on your plate," or "You wouldn't understand the complexities of these investment vehicles." The patronizing tone was like a slap, but I was still hoping to coax the truth out of him, to find a rational explanation for the creeping dread. I started looking things up online. What kind of accounts were these? What did it mean if someone used your SSN? The answers I found were terrifying. Identity theft, fraud, potential tax implications. My fear grew, cold and sharp. I tried to find paperwork. I looked through his office, subtly at first, then more frantically when he was out. But everything was either locked away or seemingly innocuous. Bank statements for accounts I knew about, investment summaries that looked legitimate on the surface, but none for the institution mentioned in the credit alert. It was like trying to catch smoke. He was always one step ahead, or maybe I was just too naive to know where to look. My sleep evaporated. I'd lie awake for hours, the fear a cold knot in my stomach, listening to his quiet breathing beside me, feeling a chilling distance grow between us even in the intimacy of our bed. I started noticing other things. Small amounts of money missing from our joint checking account, transactions I didn't recognize. When I asked, he had ready explanations, a payment for something I'd forgotten, a transfer between accounts. But the explanations felt paper-thin, his eyes just a little too quick to dart away. I felt like I was going crazy, paranoid, seeing deception everywhere. He isolated me subtly. If I brought up finances, the conversation would turn into a fight, with him accusing me of not trusting him, of being ungrateful for his hard work. He'd make me feel guilty for even questioning him. My friends, if I hinted at my concerns, would often side with him or minimize it. "Oh, men are like that with money," they'd say. "He's probably just trying to protect you." The gaslighting was subtle, insidious, making me doubt my own sanity, my own instincts. My sense of reality began to warp. Was I overreacting? Was he really just being a typical husband handling the finances? But the cold, hard facts, the credit alert, the mysterious mail, his defensive reactions, screamed otherwise. My early attempts to resolve it through gentle probing, through hoping for a simple explanation, were met with a wall of denial and manipulation. Each failed attempt chipped away at my trust, at my sense of self-worth, leaving me feeling small, powerless, and increasingly alone in a house that no longer felt like a home. The safe harbor had turned into a cage, and the bars were invisible, built of lies and control. The emotional toll was immense. I felt constantly on edge, jumping at shadows, analyzing every word, every look. My appetite vanished. I lost weight. My reflection showed a woman I barely recognized, eyes wide with anxiety, a permanent frown etched onto my face. The man I loved was becoming a stranger, a shadowy figure capable of something I couldn't comprehend. The questions gnawed at me. What was he hiding? How deep did it go?
And why?
Why would he do this to us? The us felt increasingly fragile, a concept fracturing under the weight of his secrets. The problems began to intensify, multiplying like a virus. The initial credit alert was just the tip of the iceberg. More notifications followed, for other accounts, other lines of credit, all in my name, all using my SSN. Some were investment accounts, others seemed to be for loans or credit cards. The sheer volume was staggering, overwhelming. I felt a cold panic seize me. How many of these were out there? What was he doing with them? What was he planning? Obstacles appeared at every turn. When I tried calling the financial institutions listed on the alerts, posing as myself, they would ask security questions I couldn't answer, details about transactions I'd never made, account histories I didn't know existed. They couldn't give me information, citing privacy concerns. My own identity was being used against me, a cruel irony. He became more vigilant, more controlling. He started intercepting the mail before I could even see it, bringing it in from the box himself, sorting through it quickly, discarding envelopes without letting me look. He was always on his phone, having hushed conversations I couldn't overhear. He installed new passwords on his computer, on shared devices, locking me out of any potential digital trail. The house felt less like a shared space and more like a battleground of hidden maneuvers. I was living with a ghost, a stranger wearing my husband's face. The financial strain became more obvious. Our joint account was consistently low. Bills were being paid late, sometimes not at all. Creditors started calling, asking for me, for payments I knew nothing about. When I confronted him about the calls, he became furious. "I'm handling it," he'd snap. "Do you think I'm not working hard enough? Do you think I'm stupid? I know what I'm doing." His anger felt like a shield, deflecting any real conversation, any real accountability. But the fear in his eyes, for just a fleeting moment before the anger hardened them, was unmistakable. He was scared, which only made me more terrified. What was he doing that was putting us in such jeopardy? My emotional state deteriorated rapidly. I was constantly on edge, my body buzzing with anxiety. Sleep was a distant memory. I existed in a state of perpetual dread, waiting for the next shoe to drop. The isolation deepened. How could I explain this to anyone? That my husband was potentially committing financial fraud using my identity? It sounded insane. I felt like a character in a bad movie, trapped in a plot I didn't understand, with a villain who slept in the next room. The life I had built, the sense of security I cherished, was dissolving around me. Each new credit alert, each hushed phone call, each intercepted letter was a blow, chipping away at my hope, at my ability to cope. I tried going to a lawyer, a brief, exploratory consultation. They listened patiently, but without concrete proof, account numbers, transaction details, proof of his actions. It was mostly speculation. They advised me to gather evidence, which felt impossible with his lockdown on information. I felt trapped, cornered, with nowhere to turn. The walls of the cage were closing in, built brick by brick from his lies and my dwindling ability to fight back. The future I had envisioned evaporated, replaced by a murky, terrifying uncertainty. Would I be held responsible for his actions? Would I lose everything? The house, my savings, my reputation? The weight of these possibilities was crushing, leaving me gasping for air in a rising tide of panic. The midpoint arrived not with a bang, but with a chilling, silent realization. It happened late one night. I was downstairs, unable to sleep, scrolling through old photos on my laptop, trying to find some anchor in the past, some reminder of the man I married. I stumbled upon a folder I hadn't seen in years, labeled innocuously. Curiosity, born of desperation, made me click. Inside wasn't photos, but scanned documents. And there, tucked away in a subfolder titled Admin, were scans of my personal documents, my driver's license, my passport, and several clear, legible scans of my social security card. My blood ran cold. He hadn't just found my SSN somewhere. He had deliberately scanned my card, my identity. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was calculated. Planned. The sheer violation of it stole my breath. It wasn't about protecting me. It was about using me. Using my identity, my good credit history, my clean financial record, for something. Something he needed to hide. In that moment, staring at the digital image of my social security card, the card I kept locked away for safety, I saw everything with terrifying clarity. The mystery accounts, the intercepted mail, the gaslighting, the secrecy. It wasn't a husband navigating complex finances. It was a predator using his prey's identity for his own gain, leaving her vulnerable to the consequences. The man I married was gone. Or perhaps he had never truly existed. The man I saw in those scanned documents, the man behind the locked doors and the hushed calls, was a stranger, a deceiver, a fraud. And he was using my life as his playground. The hurt, the confusion, the fear, they were still there, a heavy cloak wrapped around me. But a new feeling surged through the icy grip of dread, a cold, hard anger. Not the hot, explosive kind, but a deep, settled fury that felt like steel settling in my bones. This wasn't something I could talk him out of. This wasn't a problem we could solve together. He wasn't a partner who had made a mistake. He was an opponent who had attacked me, fundamentally, at the core of my identity and security. My perspective shifted entirely. I wasn't a confused wife trying to understand her husband's complex affairs. I was a target, a victim, and if I didn't fight back, he would destroy me along with himself. My strategy changed in that instant. I couldn't confront him. He'd just find another way to hide, to manipulate. I couldn't rely on gentle persuasion. He understood only power, control, and secrecy. I needed to stop him. Not for us anymore, because there was no us. I needed to stop him for me, to protect myself from the fallout, from the ruin he was building in my name. The discovery of the scanned SSN wasn't just information, it was a key. It unlocked a door in my mind, replacing fear with a chilling determination. I knew, with absolute certainty, that I was no longer trying to save my marriage. I was fighting for my survival. The naive wife was gone, replaced by someone harder, colder, driven by a need for justice and self-preservation. The love I felt for him, or thought I felt, curdled into something bitter and toxic. The man who slept upstairs, the man who had shared my life, was an enemy, and I had to treat him as such. The transformation was complete, silent, and irreversible. My tears dried up, replaced by a steely resolve. I wouldn't just weather the storm. I would find a way to navigate it, to turn his own deception against him. The game had changed, and I was finally ready to play. Everything started to fall apart faster than I could have imagined. The calls from creditors became more frequent, more aggressive. Some threatened legal action. The amounts owed were far larger than I could have possibly accrued on my own, even with the accounts he'd opened. It became clear he wasn't just using my identity to open accounts. He was leveraging them, perhaps transferring money out, using them as conduits for something else entirely. The deeper crisis arrived like a tidal wave. One morning, I received an official-looking envelope from the bank holding our mortgage. I opened it with shaking hands. It was a notice of default. Payments had been missed for months. Our house, the sanctuary, the symbol of our life together, was on the verge of foreclosure. It wasn't just my identity he was jeopardizing now. It was our physical home, the ground beneath my feet. When I confronted him, showing him the letter, his face was a mask of panic, quickly masked by rage. "How did you get that?" he demanded, his voice a low snarl. "You've been going through my things." He didn't deny the default, didn't offer an explanation, just attacked me for finding out. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. It wasn't shame or regret in his eyes, but fear. Fear of being caught. He started talking about needing to move money quickly, about temporary setbacks, about things being more complex than they looked. He was clearly in deep trouble, and he was dragging me down with him. All seemed lost. The house, my financial stability, my reputation, everything was teetering on the brink. I felt an overwhelming sense of despair, a suffocating weight pressing down on me. I was trapped in a burning building, and the man who set the fire was the only other person inside. He became more erratic, alternating between anger, panic, and moments of chilling calm where he'd try to act like everything was normal, making plans for the weekend, talking about future vacations, as if the mountain of debt and deceit didn't exist. It was a terrifying performance, highlighting the depth of his detachment from reality, or perhaps from the consequences for anyone but himself. He started subtly threatening me, not physically, but financially, emotionally. "If you leave, you'll have nothing," he'd say, his voice low and chilling. "You think you can make it on your own? After what you've done?" He was twisting the narrative, trying to blame me for his own actions, for the crisis he had created. He was poisoning the well of our shared history, rewriting our past to justify his present actions. I felt utterly defeated. Where could I go? How could I start over with potential mountains of debt tied to my name, with my credit ruined, with the house gone? The world outside the front door seemed like a hostile, impossible place. I spent days in a fog of despair, barely eating, barely sleeping. The house, once filled with warmth, now felt cold and empty, haunted by the ghost of the life we were supposed to have. Every object was a reminder of his betrayal, of the lies woven into the fabric of our existence. The feeling of being utterly alone, abandoned by the person who was supposed to be my partner, was a profound, soul-deep agony. This was rock bottom. All the hope I had clung to, the hope that he would somehow explain, somehow fix it, somehow reveal this was all a terrible misunderstanding. It evaporated like mist in the sun. There was no cavalry coming. There was no magical solution. There was only me, standing in the ruins of my life, with the architect of its destruction standing right beside me, still trying to convince me it was my fault. The crisis wasn't just financial, it was an existential one. It forced me to confront the brutal reality of who he was and who I needed to become to survive. The pain was a physical presence, a constant ache in my chest, a heavy weight on my shoulders. I felt broken, utterly shattered. The turning point came, not through a sudden epiphany, but through the quiet accumulation of despair reaching a critical mass. I was sitting in the ruins of our living room, the default notice spread on the coffee table like a death sentence, feeling the cold grip of hopelessness tighten around me. I looked around at the room, at the furniture we had picked out together, the photos on the wall, the life that was about to be swallowed whole by his deceit. And something inside me snapped. Not violently, but quietly, definitively. The despair didn't vanish, but it hardened into something else, a fierce, protective resolve. I couldn't let him do this to me. I couldn't let him take everything and leave me with nothing but ruin and debt. I wouldn't be a passive victim anymore. The realization was simple, stark, and liberating. I had nothing left to lose. The worst was already happening. So I could either sink or I could fight with everything I had. The anger returned, cold and sharp, but this time it wasn't tinged with hurt. It was pure fuel. My mind, previously clouded by fear and confusion, began to clear. I remembered the scan documents, the SSN, the credit alerts, the pattern of opening accounts in my name. He wasn't just racking up debt. He was likely using these accounts for activities he wanted to hide, activities that were probably illegal, possibly involving significant sums of money he didn't want traced back to him. And that, I suddenly understood, meant the IRS. Tax fraud. Unreported income funneled through accounts in my name. That was something they cared about. Something they had the power to investigate, to freeze assets, to unravel complex financial schemes. A regular lawyer might struggle to get the necessary information, but the IRS had teeth. They had subpoena power. They could access financial records that were impenetrable to me. The decision solidified within me, cold and unyielding. I wouldn't confront him directly. That would just give him time to cover his tracks further. I wouldn't appeal to his conscience. I now knew he had none where his own gain was concerned. My only path was to go outside, to bypass him entirely and bring in a force he couldn't control, couldn't manipulate, couldn't gaslight. It felt like stepping off a cliff into the unknown, terrifying but necessary. This was my fight now, and I would use the tools he had given me, the evidence of his use of my identity, the pattern of suspicious accounts, to build a case against him. It wasn't about revenge, not entirely. It was about self-preservation, about reclaiming my identity, my future, from the wreckage he had created. It was about forcing accountability, about ensuring he faced the consequences of his actions, not just for the debt, but for the profound violation of trust, the calculated destruction he had wrought. My determination was absolute. I would gather every shred of evidence I could, meticulously, secretly. The scanned SSN was my starting point. The credit reports listing the mysterious accounts were crucial. The default notice on the house, proof of the real-world financial damage. Every overheard snippet of conversation, every piece of mail I could surreptitiously photograph, every detail I could recall, it all became part of my arsenal. The fear was still a constant companion, a low thrumming beneath my skin, but it was overshadowed now by a grim resolve. I was no longer the confused, hurt wife. I was a woman fighting for her life, for her future, with a chilling clarity born of betrayal and desperation. The turning point wasn't a moment of hope, but a moment of absolute, cold certainty. I knew what I had to do, and I knew I had to do it alone, in secret, with everything I had. The final act unfolded with a terrifying, almost surreal slowness. After that decision, I moved with a quiet, focused energy I hadn't known I possessed. Every interaction with him was a performance, a carefully constructed facade of normalcy. I smiled, I nodded, I went through the motions of our life together, all while gathering my evidence in secret. I took photos of the scanned documents, downloaded the credit reports to a secure location, started keeping a detailed log of every suspicious event, every late bill, every hushed phone call. It was painstaking, nerve-wracking work, done in the dead of night while he slept or during brief windows when he was out. I felt like a spy in my own home. When I finally had what felt like enough, undeniable proof of his access to and use of my SSN, combined with the pattern of strange accounts and the tangible consequence of the mortgage default, I contacted the IRS. Finding the right department, navigating the bureaucracy, explaining my situation, it was a daunting process, filled with forms, phone calls, and endless waiting. I had to lay it all out, the betrayal, the fear, the cold, hard facts of his deceit. I focused on the use of my SSN, the likely tax implications of whatever scheme he was running, the fact that he was using my identity to shield himself while leaving me exposed to the fallout. They listened. They asked questions. They asked for my evidence. I provided everything. Then came more waiting. Silence stretched into weeks, an agonizing limbo where I lived with the constant fear that he would discover what I had done, or that the IRS wouldn't act, leaving me more vulnerable than ever. During this time, he seemed almost manic. He was still secretive, still defensive, but there was an undercurrent of frantic energy. He was talking about needing money urgently, about potential deals that were falling through, about needing to restructure things. He was clearly in deep trouble, but he still believed he could maneuver his way out of it. He seemed oblivious to the quiet storm gathering on the horizon, the storm I had helped unleash. The tension in the house was thick enough to cut with a knife. Every unexpected car outside, every ringing phone sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I was living on a razor's edge, waiting for the inevitable collision. And then the day came. I was in the kitchen, making coffee, trying to project a calm I didn't feel, when his phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. He took the call in the living room, his voice initially dismissive, then faltering. I watched him from the doorway, saw his face drain of color. The voice on the other end was cold, official, relentless. I heard snippets. Internal Revenue Service, investigation, assets frozen. Accounts linked, my name was mentioned. My social security number. He gripped the phone like a lifeline, his knuckles white. His eyes darted around the room, wild and unfocused, like a cornered animal looking for an escape that wasn't there. And then it happened. The moment I had both dreaded and desperately anticipated. The voice on the phone delivered the final blow, the words echoing slightly in the sudden silence of the room. He made that choked, broken sound, and his body seemed to lose all coherence. He didn't slump, he just fell. Collapsed onto the floor, the phone still broadcasting its cold judgment. His eyes were wide, staring at nothing, his face a mask of pure, blindsided shock. This was the plot twist, the cruel irony he never saw coming. He thought he was untouchable, that his secrets were safe, that he had outmaneuvered me, perhaps everyone. He never imagined that the quiet, seemingly naive wife he had used and gaslight would be the one to meticulously gather the evidence and trigger the mechanism of his undoing. He thought his actions existed in a separate sphere, that his financial machinations were untouchable by emotional fallout or by me. He never saw me as a threat, only as a resource to be exploited, a liability to be managed if I became too inquisitive. He certainly never envisioned me having the clarity, the cold resolve, or the resourcefulness to figure out who to go to and what specific information would bring his world crashing down. He was blindsided not just by the consequence, but by the source. His collapse wasn't just about the frozen assets. It was the shattering realization that the person he had most betrayed was the one who held the key to his destruction and had chosen to use it. His lies, his deceit, his use of my identity. They hadn't protected him. They had created the very path to his downfall, a path I had now activated. His collapse was the physical manifestation of his universe imploding, triggered by the hand he never saw coming. The aftermath is quiet. The silence in the house after they left, after the initial shock, was profound. His collapse wasn't a medical emergency, not in the way paramedics would treat it. It was something else, a system overload of his own making. He recovered physically, but something fundamental had broken. The legal process is slow, complex, and emotionally draining. There are investigations, interviews, the cold, clinical language of fraud and assets and liabilities. The house, our shared life, became a casualty. It was part of the frozen assets, tangled in the legal mess. I had to leave, to find a new place, to start over with a few boxes of my belongings and the heavy weight of what had happened. There's a strange mix of feelings. Relief, sharp and clean, that it's over, that the constant dread has lifted. Vindication, yes, a cold, hard satisfaction that his deceit was exposed, that he faced consequences directly because of what I did. But also, a profound sadness. Sadness for the life that was lost, for the future that will never be, for the man I thought I married who never really existed. The betrayal cuts so deep that even his downfall couldn't fully heal the wound. It's a bittersweet victory, if you can even call it that. I protected myself. I ensured I wasn't left responsible for the full weight of his actions. I reclaimed my identity, my financial future. But the cost was immense. The trust is shattered, perhaps irrevocably, not just in him, but a little bit in the world, in how easily appearances can deceive. I learned resilience I never knew I had, a strength forged in the fire of desperation. I learned that sometimes the only person you can truly rely on to protect you is yourself. And sometimes the people closest to you can be the most dangerous. There's a long road ahead, rebuilding not just my finances, but my sense of self, my ability to trust again. The scars are deep, invisible to the eye, but a permanent part of who I am now. The quiet life I desired is gone, replaced by a new, uncertain path, one I walk alone now. But I walk it with my head held a little higher, with the knowledge that I faced the storm and didn't break. The dust is settling, but the landscape is irrevocably changed. It's a stark, sometimes lonely landscape, but it's mine now, and I get to build on it with truth, not lies. The air feels different now, lighter perhaps, without the suffocating weight of his secrets. It's not the blue sky I imagined, but it's real. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to fight for yourself when you felt most vulnerable, I'd love to hear you're not alone. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these stories to life.